Maya hated art class, not art itself. No, she loved the idea of creation. The way colors could pop and shapes could tell a story. But her hands, they just didn't cooperate. When Mrs. Albright said, "Express yourself, Maya. Let the paint flow," Maya's paints flowed all right off the canvas and onto the floor. Her charcoal sketches looked more like abstract blobs than the still life she was supposed to be rendering. And don't even get her started on the pottery wheel, which usually ended with a lump of clay spinning wildly, resembling a small muddy tornado. Her true language wasn't oils or pastels. It was Python. It was the elegant logic of loops and functions, the precise beauty of algorithm in the world of coding. Every command was deliberate. Every variable held a specific purpose. There. She wasn't clumsy. She was a conductor, orchestrating lines of text into intricate, functional symphonies. While other kids doodled subdoors in their notebooks, Maya filled hers with pseudocoda and flowcharts, imagining programs that could solve anything from climate change to the mystery of why her cat insisted on sleeping on her keyboard. She was 16, a junior, at Northwood High, and felt perpetually out of place. Classmates chatted about TikTok trends and Friday night football games, while Maya's mind hummed with the potential of neural networks and machine learning. She had a small group of friends who tolerated her tech talk, mostly because she could fix their glitchy phones or whip up a cool custom theme for their social media profiles. But none of them truly understood the quiet thrill she got from bedogging a complex program, or seeing 1,000 lines of code suddenly click into place. One dreary Tuesday afternoon, after another disastrous art class involving watercolors that rebelled against her every brushstroke, Maya trudged home, a dull ache behind her eyes. Her grandpa Joe was already in the living room, a worn-out record spinning on his ancient turntable. It was a sound Maya had grown up with, the smooth, powerful voice of Elvis Presley filling their small house. Grandpa Joe was an Elvis fanatic, a walking encyclopedia of the King's life, music, and movies. His living room was a shrine. Framed album covers, a mini replica of Graceland on the mantelpiece, and a constant stream of Elvis tunes, from early rockabilly to his soulful ballads. "Rough day, kiddo?" Grandpa Joe asked, not looking up from the newspaper. He'd even tried to teach her to draw, once sketching stick figures that were somehow more lifelike than anything Maya could produce. Maya slumped onto the armchair, kicking off her sneakers. "You could say that," Mrs. Albright suggested. "I try a different medium." "I think she means I should give up art entirely," Grandpa Joe chuckled, the record flipping to Jailhouse Rock. "Nonsense. Everyone's an artist, Maya. Just gotta find your brush." "My brush is a keyboard, Grandpa," she muttered, staring at the spinning record. The iconic image of Elvis on the album cover seemed to stare back, his eyes full of raw energy, his lip curled in that famous smirk, his hair, dark and slick, shone even in the faded print. An idea, faint at first, began to flicker in Maya's mind, like a small stubborn spark. A different medium, Mrs. Albright had said. What if her brush was a keyboard? What if the canvas wasn't a stretched piece of linen, but a digital screen, infinite and adaptable? She thought about the complex algorithms she'd been studying for her advanced computer science class, as images even generate new ones. Could she apply that to art? Could she make a portrait? Not by painting, but by coding. The idea was wild, audacious, and frankly, a little crazy. No one she knew had ever done anything like it. It wasn't just about creating a digital image. It was about building it from the ground up, pixel by pixel, line by line of code, like constructing a living being out of pure logic. And Benage was everywhere, iconic. Instantly. Rek Evs Keftiware. Kamanis. But more than that, his face held so much emotion, so much history. Could a machine guided by her code capture the swagger, the vulnerability, the soul of the king? She imagined writing lines of code that didn't just define a shape, but an expression. Algorithms that understood light and shadow, not as values on a palette, but as mathematical relationship. Functions that could recollect the subtle curve of his lip or the sparkle in his eyes. It seemed impossible, yet utterly compelling. The music swelled, Elvis's voice commanding the air, and Maya felt a surge of energy she hadn't experienced in weeks. This wasn't about pleasing Mrs. Albright or proving a point. This was about pushing the boundaries of what she knew, about merging her two seemingly separate worlds, the logical precision of code and the boundless creativity. "Grandpa," she said, her voice suddenly alive, "what if I told you I could paint a picture without ever touching a brush?" Grandpa Joe lowered his newspaper, a curious twinkle in his eye. "Now, that sounds like a magic trick, Maya Bell." Maybe she grinned a genuine, excited grin. Or maybe it's just a lot of code. The canvas was ready, not linen or paper, but a blank screen waiting for the first line of instruction. And her subject, the king himself, was already singing his timeless tune, inspiring her in ways a still life of fruit never could. Maya felt a thrilling challenge rising within her. She was going to be stunning. The next morning, Maya was up before the sun, her mind buzzing with code. The idea of painting Elvis with algorithm hadn't faded. If anything, it had grown brighter, more insistent. She brewed a pot of strong coffee, something she usually only did during exam week, and pulled out her trusty laptop. Her room, usually a chaotic mix of textbooks and tangled charging cables, felt like a secret laboratory. She started with research not into art history, but into advanced image processing, generative art, and neural networks. She dove deep into academic papers and online forums, trying to find anyone who had attempted something similar. Most digital art involved drawing on a tablet or manipulating existing images. What Maya envisioned was different, building an image from pure data. "Okay, Elvis," she murmured to her screen. "How do I turn your legendary coolness into ones and zeros?" Her initial approach was to break down the concept of a portrait. What makes a face recognizable? Shapes, proportions, colors, light, shadow, and crucially, emotion. How do you translate smirk into mathematical parameters? How do you define charisma as a function? She decided to start with the basics, building a framework. She began writing a Python script, a language she was most comfortable with. Her first challenge was creating a basic grid system like the pixels on a screen, but infinitely more granular. She didn't want a blocky, pixelated image. She wanted smoothness, realism, life. This meant creating an algorithm that could generate a massive, high-resolution grid, where each pixel wasn't just a square, but a point that could interact with its neighbors. This was just the beginning. How do you define the curve of a cheek, the line of a jaw, the sweep of hair? She started thinking about mathematical curves. Bezier curve splines, but scaled up. Instead of drawing a curve, she needed to generate it through a series of interconnected points and weighted values. She envisioned an algorithm that could read reference images of Elvis, not just as flat pictures, but as three-dimensional forms captured in 2 dimensions. She spent hours poring over hundreds of photos of Elvis. Young Elvis, movie star Elvis, Las Vegas Elvis. She studied the subtle nuances of his facial structure, the way light caught his cheekbones, the slight asymmetry in his smile, the intensity in his eyes. She even watched old interviews trying to understand the underlying structure of his expressions. "It's like reverse engineering a face," she explained to her best friend Chloe, who visited later that evening, bringing pizza and a healthy dose of skepticism. Chloe, with her bright pink hair and an enviable talent for graphic design, peered over Maya's shoulder at the screen, which showed nothing but lines of code and a few very basic, blocky shapes. "So you're going to type Elvis face here and it just appears," Maya chuckled, running a hand through her already messy bun. Data points for a twinkle in his eye. "Maya, you're nuts." "Maybe," Maya admitted, a determined glint in her own eyes. "Think about it. What is an image, really? It's a collection of data, polls with color values. I'm just building those pixels from scratch, based on rules I define, rather than capturing them with a camera or drawing them freehand. Her initial attempts were, predictably, failures. The first Elvis she generated looked like a crude alien, a series of distorted polygons with no discernible human features, let alone the king's iconic face. It was frustrating. A stark reminder of the immense complexity of the human form, especially one as dynamic as Elvis's. She wanted to capture his essence, not just his likeness. She realized she needed to go deeper than just defining shapes. She needed to understand how light interacted with surfaces, how shadows created depth, how subtle variations in color could convey emotion. This led her down another rabbit hole: the physics of light-color theory as applied to digital rendering, and even the psychology of facial recognition. She worked late into the night. The only sounds, the soft hum of her laptop, and the occasional clack of keys, debugging errors became a familiar dance. A misplaced comma, a wrong indentation, a flawed mathematical operation, any one of them could turn her nascent portrait into a chaotic mess. Each small victory, however, felt enormous. A function that correctly rendered a smooth curve, an algorithm that could apply a gradient to simulate subtle skin tones. She kept a small frame photo of Elvis on her desk, a classic black and white shot from his early career. His eyes, even in the still photo, seemed to hold a challenge, a vibrant energy. Could her code capture that fire? Could it make him alive on the screen? She knew this wasn't just a school project anymore, it was an obsession. It was her way of proving to herself, and maybe to the world, that art didn't have to be limited to brushes and canvases. It could be born from the elegant logic of code, built line by line, pixel by pixel, until something truly stunning emerged. The architect of Pixels was hard at work laying the digital foundations for the king. Weeks bled into months. Maya's room became a fortress of focused intensity. Empty coffee mugs piled up next to her keyboard, and the whiteboard on her wall was a dizzying maze of equations, diagrams, and cryptic notes like I sparkle algo, LFO, timing, and lit curl, cine, wave mod. Her parents, though supportive, sometimes wondered if their daughter was disappearing into a digital void. Grandpa Joe just smiled knowingly, occasionally bringing her a plate of homemade cookies. He understood obsession. Process was excruciatingly slow. A constant loop of coding, running the script, analyzing the output, and then bedding or refining. She started with the basic structure of the head. Instead of just drawing an oval, she was defining the skull's curvature, the placement of the eye sockets, the angle of the jawline using complex mathematical models. This wasn't about tracing, it was about generating. Her first breakthrough came when she managed to create a rudimentary 3D wireframe model of a human head from her code. It was stark and skeletal, but it was there, a true three-dimensional structure built from pure data. Then came the challenge of skin-applying textures, colors, and the subtle variations that make skin look real, not like plastic. She developed algorithms that could mimic the way light diffused across skin, the shadow under the chin. The eyes were the hardest. Elvis's eyes, they were legendary, soulful, intense, captivating. How do you code soul? She designed separate modules, one for the iris, one for the pupil, one for the whites, and then layers for reflections and highlights. She even tried to simulate the subtle wetness of the tear duct. She researched the human eye's anatomy, its interaction with light, the way it changes with emotion. Her first attempt at the eyes was unsettling. They were perfectly symmetrical, geometrically precise, but lifeless, like two glass marbles staring blankly from a computer-generated face. It was the uncanny valley effect, something almost human, but just off enough to be disturbing. They're dead, she whispered, leaning back in her chair, frustration bubbling. "My code is brilliant, but it's soulless." She remembered something Grandpa Joe had said once, looking at a painting of Elvis. "It's not just what you see, it's what you feel." Maya realized she wasn't coding just lines and shapes. She needed to code feeling. This led her to explore random variations and subtle imperfections. No human face is perfectly symmetrical. No two moments of light are identical. She introduced subtle noise functions, tiny control deviations in her algorithm that mimicked the organic irregularities of real life. A fraction of a degree tilt in one eye, a barely perceptible flicker of light, an almost imperceptible asymmetry in the curve of a lip. It was counterintuitive to her precise coding brain, but it was key. She also started integrating data from different emotional states, not just happy or sad, but the subtle micro-expressions that flashed across Elvis's face in videos. She fed her algorithms thousands of frames, analyzing the muscle movements around his eyes and mouth, trying to distill the essence of his famous smirk, his earnest gaze, his playful wink. This was where the machine learning aspect really came into play. Her code was learning from Elvis himself. One late night, after hours of tweaking parameters for the eyes, she ran the script. The basic head model was there now with rudimentary skin textures, and then the eyes appeared. Maya leaned forward, holding her breath. This time, they weren't marbles, they had depth. There was a faint glimmer, a hint of life. They weren't quite Elvis yet, but they weren't dead. For a moment she felt a chill, like a ghost was stirring in her machine. She decided to test. She pulled up a famous photo of Elvis, one where he was looking directly at the camera, a slight knowing smile on his face. She set her generated eyes next to it on the screen. While hers were still nascent, the expression she had coded, that subtle intensity, was starting to emerge. "Okay, Elvis," she whispered. "Are you in there?" The breakthroughs became more frequent after that. The mouth, a combination of complex curves and volume. Understanding how the lips compressed and stretched, she focused on his iconic lip curl, a blend of confidence and playfulness. She wrote an algorithm that could generate variations of the curl, allowing her to fine-tune it until it felt just right. Then came the hair. Elvis's pompadour was a character in itself. It wasn't just black hair. It had shine, volume, individual strands, and that unmistakable swoop. Maya experimented with particle systems, algorithm that simulated individual strands of hair, each reacting to light and gravity, yet following the overarching shape of the pompadour. It was a staggering amount of computational power, but the results were promising. The portrait was slowly, painstakingly coming into focus. It was still a work in progress, a collection of intricately linked modules, but the pieces were starting to fit together. It wasn't just a collection of pixels anymore, it was starting to feel like a presence, a digital sculpture, carved not with chisels, but with lines of code. The ghost of the king was indeed starting to emerge from the machine. And Maya, the architect of pixels, felt a profound sense of awe and responsibility. She wasn't just creating an image, she was trying to bring a legend back to life, one line of code at a time. The smell of burnt popcorn filled Maya's room. It was 3 a.m., and she had forgotten the microwave popcorn she'd optimistically started an hour ago. She hadn't moved from her chair, eyes glued to the screen. For the past 2 days, she'd been obsessively refining the lighting algorithm. She wasn't just applying a light source. She was simulating the way light bounces off skin, reflects in the eyes, creates subtle shadows that define form and mood. She was using a technique called ray tracing, but instead of just tracing rays of light to generate an image, she was using her custom algorithms to define how those rays interacted with the coded surfaces of Elvis's face. It was like building a miniature, virtual photography studio inside her computer, where every light, every reflection was calculated with meticulous precision. It was still monochrome for simplicity, focusing purely on form and light, but this time something truly remarkable happened. As the image resolved piece by painstaking piece, a familiar shape started to emerge. Curve of the nose, the strong line of the jaw, the distinct arc of the eyebrows, they were all there built from her code. But it wasn't just the shapes. It was the interplay of light and shadow defining the contours of his face in a way that felt sculptural, three-dimensional. The subtle highlight on his cheekbone. The soft shadow, it was purposeful, coded to evoke realism. She leaned closer, her heart thumping. The eyes, they were still not perfect, but they weren't dead anymore. They held a glimmer, a faint spark of life. And the mouth, though not yet fully detailed, had a hint of that familiar, confident set. "Oh my God," she whispered, a rush of adrenaline flooding her system. It wasn't just a face, it was his face. The undeniable, iconic silhouette of Elvis Presley, sculpted from lines of code. It wasn't stunning yet, not in the way she envisioned it, but it was unequivocally recognizable. It was a ghost, yes, but a very distinct, very familiar ghost. A wave of exhaustion washed over her, but it was quickly replaced by exhilaration. All those hours, all those frustrating errors, all the moments of doubt, they suddenly coalesced into this one breathtaking moment of recognition. She had done it. She had coaxed a face out of the abstract logic of algorithms. She knew exactly who she had to show it to first. Grandpa Joe, he was the ultimate Elvis expert, the most discerning eye she could find. If he could see Elvis in this nascent coded form, then she was truly on the right track. It was almost 4 a.m., but she couldn't wait. She grabbed her laptop and tiptoed out of her room. Grandpa Joe usually woke up early, but even he probably wouldn't be up yet. She found him in the kitchen, surprisingly, already making coffee. He was an early riser, but this was a new record. "Grandpa," she whispered, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep and excitement. He turned, rubbing his eyes. "Maya Bell, what in the world are you doing up? Did you finally break the internet?" She didn't answer, just pushed the laptop into his hands, already open to the latest rendering. "Look." Grandpa Joe, squinting in the dim kitchen light, took the laptop. He expected to see more of the abstract shapes, or maybe a slightly less alien face. But then his eyes widened. He adjusted his glasses, leaning closer. The familiar image, though still uncolored and somewhat stark, seemed to mesmerize him. He was quiet for a long moment, the only sound the gentle hum of the refrigerator and Maya's rapid breathing. She watched his face, her anxiety climbing. Had she failed? Was it still too abstract? Too far from the real Elvis? Then a slow smile spread across his face. A smile that reached his eyes and crinkled the corners. He slowly shook his head, a look of profound amazement on his features. "Well, I'll be," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. He traced the screen with a trembling finger, not quite touching it. "Maya, that's him. That's my boy. Even without the color, without the spark, I'd know him anywhere." Tears pricked Maya's eyes. This was it. This was the validation she needed, the proof that her crazy idea wasn't so crazy after all. Grandpa Joe, the king's most devoted fan, recognized him. How did you do it?" he asked, looking up at her, his eyes shining. "It's like you pulled him right out of the air." "Code, Grandpa," she said, a joyful laugh escaping her lips. "Just a lot of code." He handed the laptop back to her, still shaking his head in wonder. "You've got his eyes, kiddo." That look he had, like he knew a secret. And his chin, oh, the chin. He looked at her with a renewed sense of pride. Mrs. Albright might have been right. You just needed a different brush. Who knew it'd be a keyboard? The exhaustion was still there. But it was now a triumphant exhaustion. The glimmer of recognition in her coded portrait, and more importantly, in her Grandpa Joe's eyes, was all the fuel she needed. The ghost was becoming solid. The legend was taking shape, line by line, pixel by pixel, right there on her screen. And for the first time, Maya allowed herself to truly believe. This portrait of Elvis created by her code was going to be truly stunning. The recognition from Grandpa Joe was a powerful boost, but it also brought a new kind of pressure. He started telling everyone, her parents, the mailman, even the lady at the grocery store, that Maya was coding Elvis to life. While heartwarming, it made her feel the weight of expectation. What if she couldn't deliver on the promise of that first glimpse? What if the stunning portrait remained forever just a glimmer? The next phase involved color and texture. Up until now, she'd focused on form, light, and shadow in grayscale. Now she had to bring in the vibrant palette of Elvis's world. The deep blue of his eyes, the warm tones of his skin, the rich black of his hair, and the iconic sequined jumpsuits. Color theory and code was a whole new beast. It wasn't just about picking RGB values. It was about how colors interacted with light, how they changed under different conditions, how they conveyed emotion. She studied countless color palettes from the 1950s and 60s, trying to capture the authentic feel of Elvis's prime. She found algorithm for color grading, for simulating different film stocks, and even for replicating the subtle grain of old photographs. She also delved into surface textures. Skin wasn't just a smooth plane, it had pores, tiny hairs, subtle imperfections that made it real. Hair wasn't just a black mass, it had individual strands, light reflections, and natural frizz. She spent days simulating the subtle texture of his famous pompadour, making sure each strand seemed to fall naturally, catching the light just so. This involved incredibly complex particle systems, each hair a tiny coded entity behaving according to physical rules. Her biggest challenge remained the eyes. They were the windows to the soul, and Elvis's soul was larger than life. The previous breakthrough had given them life, but now they needed his specific life, his spark, his intensity, his vulnerability. She added layers of complexity. Irises. Not just a single color, but intricate patterns of radial lines and subtle variations in hue. Pupils. Dynamic, responsive to simulated light, dilating or contracting to mimic a living eye. Reflections. Not just a single highlight, but multiple complex reflections of the environment, mirroring the actual light sources she'd coded into her virtual studio. She even coded tiny, almost imperceptible reflections of a microphone, a stage light, or a crowd, to give the eyes context. She felt like a surgeon meticulously working on each tiny detail, knowing that one wrong line of code could distort the entire effect. Doubt crept in a nagging whisper in the back of her mind. Could code truly capture charisma? Could it replicate the ineffable Elvisness that transcended mere physical appearance? One afternoon, during a particularly frustrating better-egg session where misplaced Kana turned Elvis's hair into a fiery red mess, Chloe came over. She found Maya slumped at her desk staring at the Technicolor disaster on her screen. "Rough day at the digital canvas?" Chloe asked gently, setting down a bag of her favorite gourmet. "Gummy bears," Maya groaned. "You have no idea I'm trying to make his hair look like hair, not a burnt wig, and his eyes, they're still just missing something." Chloe sat next to her, looking at the vibrant yet clearly wrong image. "You know, for someone who hates art class, you're pretty obsessed with this." "It's different," Maya mumbled. "With code, it feels like I'm building something from the ground up, not just trying to replicate what's already there. But sometimes I think, what if it's just a trick? What if it never truly feels alive?" My grandmother was a huge Elvis fan. She saw him live once back in the 70s. She always said it wasn't just his voice or his looks. It was the way he moved, the way he commanded the stage. He just had this electricity. "Maybe," Chloe said, thoughtfully. "It's about finding the balance. Like if you make it too perfect, it loses something. Humans aren't perfect and it loses something. Humans aren't perfect." Maya looked at imperfection as what makes it real. "What makes it human?" Maya looked at her friend. Like when you take a photo, sometimes the best ones aren't perfectly lit or perfectly posed. They have a little blur, a little grain, a little something that makes them feel natural, caught in a moment. That conversation sparked a new direction. Maya started experimenting with introducing subtle noise into her algorithms, not just for symmetry, but for other elements. A tiny, almost invisible film grain effect, a slight calculated variation in color temperature, as if the light source wasn't perfectly sterile. She even explored simulating the slight blur from movement, or the way a camera lens might subtly distort an image. It wasn't about making mistakes, but about coding natural, organic imperfections that tricked the eye into seeing life. She also started focusing on expressions more intently, moving beyond just the physical structure. She integrated data on facial muscle movements, trying to capture the transient quality of a smirk just forming, or the way his eyes might widen slightly just before he hit a high note. The biggest breakthrough came when she finally cracked a code for the light reflecting in his eyes. It wasn't just a white dot, it was a complex, almost iridescent glow, mimicking the natural moisture and curve of the eye. When she ran the script and the eyes appeared on the screen full of this new vibrant sparkle, Maya gasped. It was more than life. It was a story. In those coded reflections, she could almost see the stage lights, the flashing cameras, the adoration of the crowd. It was still code, still algorithms, but it had depth, emotion, a silent narrative. The ghost in the machine was not just present, it was singing. The weight of expectation didn't feel so heavy anymore. It felt like a guiding force. The weeks leading up to the final reveal were a blur of intense focus. Maya was no longer just building a portrait. She was meticulously crafting a digital performance. The stunning quality she aimed for wasn't just about hyperrealism. It was about capturing Elvis's soul. How do you program charisma? How do you code that unique spark that made millions adore him? She realized it wasn't about a single line of code, but about the culmination of thousands, millions working in harmony. Every tiny detail mattered. The specific way light caught the individual strands of his hair, the microscopic pores on his skin, the almost imperceptible veins visible in his eyelids, the way his famous lip curl shifted from playful to earnest. She spent days, sometimes entire nights, just on the subtle play of light around his mouth. It wasn't just about the shape of his lips, but the way they tensed slightly, the shadow they cast, the hint of a dimple that appeared when he smiled broadly. She wrote algorithms that simulated subsurface, scattering a complex light interaction that makes skin look soft and translucent, rather than flat. This was crucial for conveying the warmth and vitality of his complexion. The eyes remained her obsession. She had given them life, but now she needed to give them Elvis's life. She layered in more complex light reflections, not just from a generic environment, but from what she imagined his environment to be. Stage lights, camera flashes, the soft glow of a spotlight. She used historical photographs and video footage to study the specific reflections in his eyes, trying to simulate not just light, but context. In some angles, she coded the faint, almost imperceptible reflection of a microphone, a tiny tribute to his craft. She also integrated what she called expression, nuances. This went beyond static, facial expression. She wanted the portrait to suggest movement, thought, emotion, and flux. She studied slow motion, footage of Elvis, observing how his gaze might shift, how his brow might subtly furrow, how a smile might begin to form before fully materializing. She developed algorithm that could subtly animate these micro-expressions, creating a sense of a living, breathing being caught in a single, timeless moment. It was like coding a freeze frame that still hummed with life. Her room was a symphony of keyboard clicks and the soft whirring of her laptop's fan. She ate, slept, and breathed code. Parents brought her meals, a silent acknowledgement of her intense focus. Chloe occasionally dropped by, offering encouragement and a fresh perspective. It's starting to look like he's about to say something. Chloe remarked one evening watching the portrait on the screen. Like he's holding a thought. This was exactly what Maya was aiming for. Not just a static image, but a captured moment, brimming with potential energy. The biggest hurdle was the emotional core. How do you code charisma? Maya decided. It wasn't a single parameter. It was the sum of all parts, the confidence in his gaze, the hint of vulnerability in his posture, the playful curl of his lip, the warmth in his skin, tones, the way light seemed to gravitate to him. It was the harmonious interaction of every single algorithm, every single line of code. She started playing Elvis's music constantly while she worked, letting his voice infuse her coding process. She imagined his presence, his energy, trying to translate that intangible essence into logical commands. She wasn't just building an image, she was building an experience. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Maya reached a point where she couldn't add another line, couldn't tweak another parameter without feeling like she might break the delicate balance she had created. The portrait was complete. She ran the final render. The screen shimmered. And then slowly the image resolved. It was as if he had stepped out of time, rendered with a clarity and depth that felt almost hyper-real, yet profoundly human. His eyes full of a mesmerizing blend of confidence, and something deeper seemed to follow her. The slight knowing smile on his lips was utterly captivating. The light, meticulously calculated, seemed to glow from within him, highlighting the subtle contours of his face, the texture of his skin, the perfect swoop of his hair. It was stunning, truly stunning. Every pore, every strand of hair, every nuanced play of light and shadow, every spark in his eyes, it was all there. Born from her code, it was Elvis, imbued with a digital soul. He looked alive, vibrant, as if he might just breathe or sing or offer that famous wink. Maya leaned back, tears blurring her vision. It wasn't just an achievement in coding, it was an emotional triumph. She had taken a legend, an icon, and, through the seemingly cold logic of programming, she had captured his warmth, his charisma, his very essence. "You're beautiful, Elvis," she whispered, a lump in her throat. And for a moment, she imagined he nodded. A silent acknowledgement across the digital divide. The king's soul, translated into data, was shining bright. The finished portrait hummed on Maya's screen, a luminous testament to months of relentless dedication. It was everything she had envisioned and more. The subtle play of light and shadow on Elvis's face, the intricate texture of his skin, the almost imperceptible gleam in his eyes that spoke volumes, it was all there. A breathtaking symphony of code, but it still felt like a secret. A magnificent discovery she'd made only for herself. She knew the ultimate test awaited. Grandpa Joe. His initial reaction had fueled her, and now, seeing the final masterpiece, she needed his verdict. Could he see the king's soul in this digital creation? It was Saturday morning, and Grandpa Joe was in his usual spot, sipping coffee and reading the paper. Elvis crooning from the stereo. Maya took a deep breath, clutching her laptop. Her palms were sweaty. This wasn't like showing off a high score in a video game. This was deeply personal. "Grandpa," she said, her voice a little shaky. He looked up, a warm smile on his face. "Morning, Mayabelle. Got a new bug you need me to swat?" "No," she said, walking over and placing the laptop gently on the coffee table between them. She'd already opened the high-resolution image file. It's done, I think." Grandpa Joe set his coffee cup down, his gaze falling on the screen. The smile on his face softened, then slowly, imperceptibly faded. His eyes, usually crinkled with good humor, widened, absorbing every detail. The music played on Elvis's voice, filling the comfortable silence. He didn't speak for a long time. He leaned closer, his face inches from the screen as if trying to step into the digital space. His breath hitched slightly. His hand trembled as he reached out, then hesitated, pulling back before touching the display. Maya watched him, her heart hammering in her chest. She saw the shift in his expression. First recognition, then disbelief, then profound emotion. His eyes started to glisten, and a single tear traced a path down his weathered cheek. "Joe," Maya whispered, concerned. He finally pulled back slowly, his gaze still fixed on the screen. He cleared his throat, but his voice was thick, raspy with emotion. "Maya, my goodness, my absolute goodness." He didn't say it was realistic, he said, "My goodness." And to Maya that meant everything. He looked at her, his eyes brimming. He's right here. It's like he just walked into the room." His voice broke slightly. "You got his eyes, kiddo. That looked like he's seeing straight into your heart." He pointed a shaking finger at the screen. "And the way the light catches his hair, just like it did on stage. Oh, the king." He picked up the laptop, holding it carefully, reverently, as if it contained something precious and fragile. He turned it slightly, watching how the simulated light shifted, how Elvis's expression seemed to subtly change with the angle. It was a digital masterpiece. Yes, but more importantly, it was a living memory for Grandpa Joe. I remember seeing him in '72, he said, his voice softer, now steeped in nostalgia. Came out on stage, spotlights all on him, and he just glowed. That's it, Maya. That's the glow. You got his glow." He looked up at her, a profound look of awe and gratitude on his face. "You didn't just paint a picture, Maya Bell. You brought him back, you really did." A warm, overwhelming wave washed over Maya. This was the moment. All the struggle, all the doubt, all the endless lines of code. It was worth it. She hadn't just created a stunning image. She had touched a heart, evoked a powerful memory, bridged the gap between code and emotion. Grandpa Joe closed the laptop gently, holding it like a cherished book. "What are you going to do with it?" he asked, a hopeful note in his voice. Maya smiled, a genuine, joyful smile. "I don't know yet, Grandpa, but I think the world needs to see it." The initial fear of judgment, the weight of expectation, had dissolved. In its place was a quiet confidence. She had created something truly special, something that transcended the technical brilliance to touch the human spirit. And seeing the raw, honest emotion on her grandpa's face, Maya knew without a shadow of a doubt that her coded portrait of Elvis was not just stunning, it was heartfelt. It was art in its purest, most surprising form. The king had looked at Grandpa Joe, and Grandpa Joe had seen him. After the profound moment with Grandpa Joe, Maya felt a renewed sense of purpose. The portrait wasn't just a personal achievement. It was something she needed to share. But how? She didn't want to just post it online, lost in the endless scroll of social media. This deserved a proper unveiling, something that honored the king and the unique way he had been brought to life. She started by showing it to a few trusted people. Her parents, of course, were floored. Her dad, usually reserved, gasped when he saw the depth and realism. Her mom teared up, saying it felt like Elvis was looking right at her. Then she showed it to Chloe. Chloe, the artistic one, the one who understood traditional media, stared at the screen with her mouth agape. "Maya," she breathed, "this isn't just good. This is revolutionary. It's like a living photograph." "How did you even?" Maya tried to explain the complex algorithms, the ray tracing, the particle systems, the machine learning for expressions, but Chloe just shook her head, completely overwhelmed. "It's magic, seriously. You've somehow coded magic." Word began to spread, first among her family friends, then to her computer science teacher, Mr. Harrison. A quiet man who usually only expressed enthusiasm for clean code and efficient algorithm. When Maya showed him the portrait during his office hours, his jaw dropped. He zoomed in, examined the details, then zoomed out again, shaking his head in disbelief. "Maya," he said, his voice hushed, "this isn't just a project. This is a paradigm shift. You've bridged the gap between pure computation and emotional art in a way I've never seen." He looked at her with a new respect. "This needs to be seen on a big screen, in a proper gallery setting." A gallery? The thought was daunting. Maya was comfortable in her room, hunched over a keyboard. The idea of standing in front of people presenting her coded creation filled her with a mixture of excitement and dread. But Mr. Harrison's words resonated. This wasn't just a digital file. It was a testament to a new form of artistic expression. Mr. Harrison surprisingly took charge. He had connections in the local tech community and knew a few people at the university's art and technology department. He made some calls explaining Maya's unique process. The whispers began to turn into a buzz. A small local gallery, known for panic experimental and digital art, expressed interest. They usually didn't feature high school students, but the concept was too intriguing to pass up. They offered Maya a small corner for a one-night preview showing. It was a modest start, but it was a start. Now came the practical challenges. How do you display a digital portrait meant to be seen on a massive scale? Her laptop wouldn't cut it. She needed a high-resolution projector, special monitors, and a way to ensure the image quality was pristine. Mr. Harrison helped her research. The technical requirements, the buzz grew louder. A local tech blog picked up on the story. Teen prodigy codes portrait of Elvis. Is this the future of art? Then, a small arts magazine. Maya found herself doing interviews awkwardly, trying to explain complex coding concepts in simple terms, while also conveying the emotional depth of her creation. During one interview, the journalist asked, "What makes this different from just a really good digital painting or a photo manipulation?" Maya paused, thinking. "It's about intention," she said. "It's like building a living thing from scratch, one instruction at a time, until it has a soul." The journalist looked thoughtful, scribbling notes. "It had a soul," she murmured. "I like that." Night of the preview arrived faster than Maya expected. The gallery was small, intimate, but it felt Endymion's. A large, high-definition projector was set up pointing at a pristine white wall. The room was softly lit, creating an atmosphere of anticipation. Grandpa Joe was there, of course, looking impeccably dressed, beaming with pride. Her parents were bustling around, nervous and excited. Chloe was her rock offering, reassuring smiles and a steady hand. Mr. Harrison was proudly talking to a small group of university professors. As the time approached for the unveiling, Maya felt a knot of nerves in her stomach. What if they didn't see it? What if they just saw lines of code, not the king? What if her art was too strange, too unconventional for them to appreciate? Grandpa Joe found his eyes twinkling. "Ready, Maya Belle?" he asked, a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Just remember you made him real again. That's all that matters." She took a deep breath, looking at the blank wall. Soon Elvis would be there, not painted, not photographed, but coded. The whispers in the room died down, replaced by a collective hush. The moment of truth had arrived. The buzz was about to erupt into something much, much bigger. The gallery lights dimmed, plunging the room into a hushed anticipation. Maya stood by the projector, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Mr. Harrison gave her a reassuring nod. Grandpa Joe stood in the front row, his gaze fixed on the blank wall, a hopeful smile on his face. Maya took a deep breath, then pressed the button. A soft whir filled the air as the high-resolution projector sprang to life. Light exploded onto the pristine white wall, and slowly, majestically, the image began to resolve. It wasn't an instant pop, but a gradual unfolding, as if the pixels were coalescing, breathing life into the digital canvas. First, the deep, rich black of his hair began to emerge, perfectly coiffed, catching the simulated light with a soft sheen. Then the contours of his face, sculpted by countless lines of code defining light and shadow, began to take shape. The warmth of his skin, rendered with subtle variations in tone, seemed to glow from within. A collective gasp rippled through the small crowd. Then came the eyes. They were the last to fully materialize, and when they did, a wave of palpable emotion swept through the room. They weren't just eyes, they were windows to a soul, full of depth, confidence, and that unmistakable spark of charisma. The light reflecting in them was so meticulously rendered that it seemed to flicker as if alive. The mouth, with its iconic, knowing smirk, followed, perfectly balanced between playful charm and earnest intensity. The subtle curve of his upper lip, the faint shadow under his lower lip. Every detail was a testament to Maya's unwavering precision. Finally, the full portrait of Elvis Presley stood before them, immense and luminous on the wall. He was caught in a timeless moment, looking directly at the viewer, his gaze captivating, his presence undeniable. It wasn't just a picture, it was an experience. Silence hung heavy in the air, a silence of awe, of reverence. People were frozen, unable to look away. Many had tears in their eyes, stirred by the uncanny realism, the profound sense of presence emanating from the coded image. Grandpa Joe, his face etched with emotion, slowly raised a trembling hand and pressed it gently against his chest. "Oh, Elvis," he whispered, a tear escaping and rolling down his cheek. "You're home." Someone in the crowd coughed, breaking the spell. Then a murmuring started, growing louder, turning into exclamations of wonder. "It's like he's breathing. The eyes! My God, the eyes! I've never seen anything like it. It's not a photo. It's more. How is this even possible?" "It's just Coe." A distinguished-looking woman, an art critic from a regional newspaper, stepped forward, her expression a mix of bewilderment and wonder. "Miss Sharma," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "this is a masterpiece. You've captured not just his likeness, but his very essence. It's a miracle of technology and artistry, Maya. It's algorithms and data," she said almost apologetically. The critic chuckled softly. "Don't diminish it, young lady. Da Vinci used pigments and brushes. You've used code. The medium changes, but the art remains." People started moving closer, some reaching out as if to touch the glowing image, then pulling back as if afraid to disturb its magic. They debated, mesmerized, how something built from logical commands could evoke such profound emotion. A reporter from a local news channel pushed through the crowd, microphone in hand. "Miss Sharma, can you explain the process? How did you bring Elvis back to life with computer code?" Maya, finding her voice, explained simply, passionately. She talked about the challenges of coding, emotion, the painstaking detail of light and shadow, the hours spent trying to capture the subtle nuances of a legendary face. She spoke about the blend of logic and intuition, the science and the art. She looked at Grandpa Joe, who was now smiling broadly, nodding with pride. She saw Chloe beaming, giving her a thumbs up. She saw Mr. Harrison, his eyes shining. The room buzzed with excitement, with disbelief, with admiration. King in his digital glory dominated the wall, captivating every single person. It wasn't just stunning, it was a revelation. It was the future of art, rendered by the hands of a 16-year-old girl who once thought she hated art class. The whispers had become a roar, and the King's code had been unveiled. And it was just the beginning. The one-night preview of Maya's coded Elvis portrait was anything but a quiet affair. News spread like wildfire, fueled by breathless social media posts, awestruck art critics, and bewildered tech bloggers. The local news story went national, then international. Overnight, Maya Sharma became an unlikely sensation, a pioneer in a new frontier of art. Requests poured in, interviews with major newspapers, invitations to speak at tech conferences, inquiries from prestigious art galleries and museums across the globe. Her phone, which usually only buzzed with messages from Chloe, now constantly chimed with emails from curators and journalists. The gallery had to extend the exhibition, then move the portrait to a larger, more prominent space to accommodate the crowds. People lined up for hours, eager to witness the coded King. Many brought their own Elvis memorabilia. Some even wore Elvis costumes, transforming the viewing into a pilgrimage. They stood before the immense, luminous image, captivated by its uncanny realism and emotional depth. Maya, no longer the introverted coder found herself thrust into the spotlight. She navigated the media circus with a surprising grace, always humble, always quick to credit the inspiration from Elvis and the support from her grandpa Joe. "It's not just a technical feat," one prominent art historian wrote. "It's a profound act of empathy." Maya Sharma didn't just code pixels. She coded memory, emotion, and the enduring power of a cultural icon. For Maya, the most rewarding moments weren't the accolades, but the personal reactions. She saw people cry in front of the portrait, moved by the almost miraculous return of their beloved king. She watched as older fans pointed out details to their grandchildren, sharing stories of Elvis concerts and record-breaking hits. Her code had built more than just an image. It had built a bridge across generations, connecting past and present through a digital echo of a legend. Grandpa Joe was, of course, the happiest of all. He visited the gallery every day, sometimes just sitting quietly on a bench, gazing at the portrait, a contented smile on his face. He shared his Elvis stories with anyone who would listen, beaming with pride as he told them, "My granddaughter made him with her computer." He had become a local celebrity in his own right, the living connection to the coded king. "You know, Maya Belle," he told her one afternoon at the gallery, his eyes twinkling, Elvis always found a way to connect with people, whether it was through his music, his movies, or just his smile. "You've done the same thing with your own kind of magic." Maya smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. "He was my inspiration. Grandpa. He showed me that art can be anything as long as it comes from the heart." Her coded Elvis portrait eventually traveled, captivating audiences in major cities around the world, became a symbol of what was possible when technology and creativity merged. Universities started reaching out to her about future studies. Tech companies offered internships, and art institutions proposed commissions for other historical figures. Maya, however, remained grounded. She knew this was just the beginning. The Elvis portrait had taught her that code wasn't just for solving logical problems, it was for creating, for expressing, for evoking emotion. It was a language capable of profound beauty. She continued to code, exploring new ways to push the boundaries of generative art. But the Elvis portrait remained special, a foundational piece that reminded her of the power of her unique vision. It was a story of a girl who couldn't paint with a brush, but could paint with code. A story of a legend brought back to life not through nostalgia but through innovation. A story of connection, memory, and the surprising, heartwarming beauty that could emerge from the most unexpected places. The stunning portrait of Elvis Presley, born from lines of computer code, continued to resonate, an eternal echo of the king's legacy and the quiet triumph of a young artist who found her true canvas. And Maya, the girl who hated art class, had discovered her true artistic voice, proving that art in its purest form knows no bounds, only passion.